You've heard me say it many times that mindfulness is complicated. There are a lot of layers of depth and breadth that are involved in this practice. And if you take a program, much of that takes into account the different layers of mindfulness. But we don't always take into account the layers that are part of the individual taking a program. The fact is, not everyone is the same. And that's why different people can have different outcomes in a mindfulness program. Hi, my name is Ted Preissner, and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. And today we're going to be exploring a little bit more about mindfulness, an adjacent field of behavioral change, and how the particular aspects and backgrounds of people taking a program is also an important thing for teachers to understand. Please do remember to hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it does help the podcast tremendously. So, let's get started. Our guest today, returning to our podcast, is Preissner. Welcome. Good to see you again. And what are we talking about today? You've got a paper that, as of this recording and hopefully posting, that's just come out. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you, Ted, for having me once again. My name is Preissner. For those that have not seen the previous podcast episode, I recently finished my PhD at Maastricht University here in the beautiful and currently sunny Netherlands. And my dissertation is called Rethinking Mindfulness and Health Promotion from Trait to Targeted Eating. And that's more of a critical examination of how mindfulness is defined, measured, its, lack of effectiveness for addressing specific eating behaviors, and also participant differences in regard to mindfulness skills in terms of beliefs that could be important for researchers and practitioners to know. So when you're developing and administering a program, and this latter part is why we're here today. So specifically, we're going to talk about a study that I did. It's latent profile analysis. We're going to go probably more into the methods later. But basically, I'm looking at participant differences at the start of a program. So who are the people you're recruiting? What skills and thoughts about mindfulness-based programs might they arrive with that you need to deal with?
Yeah, and I want to actually, this is a good pause point for us. And I'm so glad you're bringing this up. Is that, as we were talking before we started the recording, you use that term recruitment as if we have a particular plan to recruit people of a particular demographic, which is often not how it goes with a generic mindfulness program like an MBSR or MBCT. It's usually just, here's the offering, and we do have application processes to ensure that we are doing our best to safeguard the people who are taking our programs and that they're taken care of. But we don't really know a lot about them beyond current risk factors that they may have with particular programs. So thank you for bringing that up. And maybe you can say a little bit more about how that fed into your research.
By fitting into my research, what specifically do you mean? Do you mean how I got to doing this study? Yeah, that? Okay. So in the last episode, we talked about the systematic review. And while doing this, I read a lot of papers, a lot of research about how mindfulness-based interventions are being applied to change eating behaviors. And I noticed that we don't really, what you just said, we don't really know a lot about these people. And coming from health promotion and health behavior change, I know how difficult it is to change a behavior, particularly a behavior that we do every single day and we have to do it. And that for many people is completely automatic and a habit. And when you then know, okay, well, my participants are, I don't know, female, male, middle-aged or younger, but that's mostly all that you get. And I've been wondering for a while when reading this, who are you in the research, not in the practitioner setting, who are you recruiting? And I'm often wondering, like, did they know about the mindfulness program beforehand? Did they think the program would help them? Is that why they're here? Were they like, why were they in the first place looking to participate in the program? And the behavior change side. So did their social environment make it easy for them to then practice the mindfulness-based exercises also at home and the new behavior that they're trying to achieve? Were they motivated to change in the first place? Did they seriously intend on doing this? And also, when we're talking about mindfulness-specific skills, what awareness to your internal sensations, your environment, what did they have before coming to your program already? What are you trying to build up? Yeah, and so then I thought, okay, let's do a study, and we call this theory-based determinants. So in my field, there's many reasons essentially how people arrive at a behavior, and either why they do it in the first place or how they can change it. Yeah. And these are often separated into things related to awareness, like even becoming aware in the first place. The behavior I'm doing right now might not be serving me and my mental or physical health. I might need to make a change, but it's also like your knowledge of the program, for example, or cues to even perform the behavior, or certain, other risks. You also have motivational components. So do you think the program is going to help you? What do you believe in terms of the pros and cons of the program? Do you seriously believe that you can do this action that they're teaching you, even when you're faced with certain barriers or your old ways? So those are some of the factors that we try and study. And this is what I did with this study. And I applied this specifically in the context of mindful eating. And I know that some of you might not know exactly what that is. So I think I need to really quickly mention this. So mindful eating and mindfulness are related. They share the same theoretical framework. But mindful eating is eating specific mindfulness. So it focuses really exclusively on the cultivation of the mindfulness skills, but that you apply in a food-related context or regarding eating behaviors. So and there's of course measurement for this.
Yeah, an important note for this, for those who are listening, who may be struggling with different kinds of eating challenges, is that what Christian did not say is that it's a diet program. That is a different thing, that it may be helpful with one's diet goals, but that's not really what the how it shows up. It shows up as paying attention to what you're eating and perhaps being able to make more informed, healthful decisions based on that. But it's not a diet program. Diet programs can be based on it. That's at its core level, it's more about awareness and choice.
Not only that, but beyond that, to say, okay, well, I might have given into my craving, but that doesn't mean I'm a horrible person. And if this sounds really abstract to you, what I just said, count yourself lucky, because unfortunately for many people, this is the automation that their brain jumps to. And so really the goal with the mindful eating program is, as Ted just said, it's not a diet program. It's not that strict, but it's to improve the relationship that you have with food and just make it kinder and more accepting. And that's what I studied, and you can measure this. Of course, there's also some controversies in the field regarding the definition and measurement, but that's not what we're going to be discussing today.
So tell us a little bit about the process then and the study itself. What did you do and what did you find?
So we recruited over 600 people, just randomly, general population sample. but we try to match this to the the gender distribution, the education distribution, and the province distribution that we see in the Netherlands. So we try to fit it in a bit, but really the goal was also to catch people that have no idea of what is mindfulness, what is mindful eating. We wanted, like, anybody could participate, right? It didn't matter what your knowledge was, if you were meditating or practicing mindfulness in other ways. And we administered the same survey 3 times over 6 months. But in this case, in this study, I'm only reporting the baseline assessment, and then 3 months after baseline was exactly the same questionnaire. And it asked about the theory-based determinants that I mentioned earlier in regards to mindfulness. So any thoughts, any pros, cons they thought about mindful eating, and about using it as a method for themselves. Yeah, and long story short, I'm gonna not talk about the statistics that's behind all of this. If you're interested, you can read the paper. But yeah, I found multiple different subgroups in regard to the mindful eating skills. And this is really interesting. So one group, about half of the sample, and they had moderate skills on both awareness, so awareness to your internal sensations and hunger, satiety, thoughts, emotions regarding eating, and also the external food environment that they were encountering. So moderate skills on this, and also on the acceptance skills. So non-judgment, non-reactance. Yeah, so like an even profile in a way. Yeah. And then I found another group that was about 25% of the sample, and they had really low awareness, barely any, but really high acceptance, which sounds extremely weird. Um, I think we can talk about the interpretation of this later, but it's fun. And the third group is completely the opposite of the other group. Really, really high awareness to everything within themselves and their environment, but they did not accept themselves, their thoughts, their behaviors at all. None at all. And then I went ahead with this and I analyzed, okay, which demographics are present in what group? And I found that this group with really high awareness, but not accepting, they were more likely to be younger, female, more educated, they had a higher body weight. But what was extremely concerning to me was that 10% of them indicated that they were struggling with an eating disorder. And this was not present in the other groups at all. So this, yeah, this made me a bit concerned. And then I went ahead and I applied my theory-based determinants to this. And I analyzed, okay, with my 3 groups, are there any differences in what they think about adopting mindful eating to help their relationship with food? And I found that this group with the high awareness, low acceptance, they had the highest knowledge of what mindful eating was. They had the highest like perception of health risks, and they believed themselves to be really susceptible to developing certain health problems. They also, interestingly, they had cues in their environment to practice mindful eating. So they had seen it in the newspaper, they had seen it on TV, on the internet, etc. They had talked to people about it. They also had the most positive attitudes in favor of mindful eating. So saying, yeah, this could help me. This could really improve the relationship I have with food. They also had social support and the highest intention to adopt it. And at the same time, this is the but, they also believed that mindful eating would make them feel bad about themselves, that it would make them think too much about their eating behavior, that it would be stressful, for example. And at the same time, they also had the lowest self-efficacy beliefs. So that means like they thought they just couldn't do it in real life as soon as they are confronted with any challenge regarding stress or just life getting crazy.
It's interesting.
And
And
yeah,
with that, I want to pause here because this is a group that is the one group of the three that's showing a higher percentage of folks who are at risk for eating disorders,
yeah,
wanting to provide help, is this idea of, yeah, mindfulness would be great. I don't think I can do it. And those two are present at the same time. And the implications of that are very interesting, is how to address that the inner critic and the confidence to be able to engage with what they expect to be effective, because we have research showing that it can be effective,
yeah,
and see those outcomes. That's a very
yeah,
interesting feature that you're uncovering here.
yeah. And at the same time, this is something I want to talk about more, is that for them, it seems like this high awareness that they constantly carry around with themselves, even though we always say like, oh yeah, improve your awareness, it might even be a barrier for them. Because confronting those really strongly perceived internal sensations such as guilt and shame regarding your eating behavior, and giving into cravings, it's so daunting for people. It is really stressful. And that's understandable. And change is hard. And confronting those is really difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that
Yeah.
these ideas around the inner critic and rumination play into this quite directly. Is that here's this wonderful thing, and yet my own mind may be getting in the way and inhibiting my ability to move forward and make that change that I want to have and that I know is right there.
Yeah. And now imagine some generic mindfulness or mindful eating program says, okay, we're going to develop this intervention and we're going to help people, but your intervention only addresses awareness to either start out, or that's the only thing you're addressing, or yeah, or you're adding the acceptance components, the exercises for this only later in the program because we know it's really difficult for novices to cultivate those skills. Uh, but your target group already has awareness. In fact, they have too much. So then it might even be likely that this group doesn't benefit from the intervention, or they might even drop out halfway before you can help them with the acceptance exercises because they're feeling too much distress by constantly being asked to pay attention to food when they already do this.
Yeah.
So this
And this,
is,
this itself leads to interesting reflections on just the structure of programs and the order in which things appear. And it's helping validate some of the programs that I teach that start with just noticing how you're doing. So you can tell, how am I? Build a little bit of awareness,
yeah,
and then immediately into self-care. Before we then get into the more complex things about going into behavior change itself, but just having an understanding of how am I doing? How do I take care of myself? Because it may be difficult for me.
yeah, exactly. But this, yeah, the study was intended as food for thought for anybody who's designing or administering mindfulness-based intervention or mindful eating intervention, that when you're treating participants as one homogeneous group with completely equal mindfulness skills and needs, that may not necessarily reflect reality and the group you are then confronted with. So yeah, think about who you are recruiting, or as Ted said, who shows up to your program. For what kind of people are you intending this intervention? And yeah, be sure to teach also the acceptance components.
Yeah.
Bring them along always in every single exercise, because not only is it one of the key features that makes mindfulness beyond just awareness, but for some individuals, it might be extremely important to have these components in there, and you might accidentally do harm.
Yeah. And in particular, this idea of acceptance, one of the things that I should note here is that within the field of mindfulness, acceptance does not mean that we have to be okay with what we're encountering. It
Yeah,
means we're accepting that these situations that
yeah,
we're feeling, whatever they happen to be, that they're here, so that we can make an informed choice about how am I doing? Do I need some self-care here? Am I okay to move forward with something that's challenging, not necessarily easy, not necessarily pleasant, but helpful to me?
Exactly, exactly. Well, not trying to change or alter them in any way. They are allowed to exist, they are allowed to be there. But I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I like to explain this with trains. And you're standing at a platform and you're waiting for the train, and then the announcer says, "Oh, well, before your train arrives, there's another train, but it's not stopping. It's just going to rush through." And this can be a bad thought, a bad emotion that you're feeling. But you're saying, okay, I'm going to listen to this. There's going to be this train coming, but I'm going to make the choice to step behind the line that is indicated on the platform, that I'm not being caught up in the wind. Like, it's okay that the train is passing through, but I'm going to like make an educated choice here and stand back.
Yeah. I don't have to
And
get
this is
caught
how
up in
I,
a moving
yeah,
train that may be harmful
yeah,
to me. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So, Kristen, for you, what are some of the really delicious, interesting bits of this that you really want to just talk about and share? Because I know there's stuff about this that's so it brings about that enthusiasm in you
Yeah.
too. So, what is that with this particular research?
Well, one of my goals is really to bridge the gap between mindfulness interventions and behavior change interventions, and saying, okay, well, both have strengths and both may have their weaknesses, but how can we make use of the strength of each of the fields? Um, and I feel like we should talk to each other more. And and this means that, for example, it might be really helpful for people that are administering or developing mindfulness-based interventions for very specific behaviors or scenarios, to start more systematically and make use of frameworks that exist. They exist in health promotion. Look it up and utilize determinants of behavior change, because even adopting the mindfulness-based program in the first place and continuing the practice at home, it's a behavior change in a way. So why not support our participants by utilizing methods that are already established in another field that is really closely related, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I wanted to say. um, yeah, before I move on, it looked like you had a thought.
No, just the one thing in addition to what you're saying, because I agree, these are adjacent fields that can complement one another. And it brings up some interesting ideas around shifting how we deliver, we as teachers, as mindfulness professionals, deliver programs that rather than, here's my, whatever the program happens to be,
Mm,
and let's say it's a more generic program, we may in the learning more about someone who wants to learn more about mindfulness, or they have a particular difficulty they're encountering, a physical illness, a behavioral change they want to do, whatever that is, that it's not, okay, so I'm aware of that, and now we do the standard program that everyone's doing the same thing. Instead, it's what may be more helpful for you with what your aspirations are, your needs are, is to do these kinds of interventions, and maybe the modified versions of those that tend to hit the bell curve of where you are and what your needs are. That's what I would like to see, so that it's a little bit more tailored to the needs of the individual.
yeah, that would be the second thing. um, to answer your earlier question, because although it is not necessarily in this study, but it's in my dissertation, I've done some analyses, and I've also read so many papers, and I see that very generic programs are being applied to a very, very specific niche thing. And I've done some comparisons, and it appears that the more tailored it is to the actual thing you are trying to change, the better, the more effective it is. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and this is so with for those who might be having a hard time getting our head around this. I know I do sometimes as well, is think of this as medication. That you may be taking the generic medication, you're taking aspirin or something, but it may be that a more specific kind of intervention would be more helpful for you because the causes of whatever it is you're encountering are different than the person who may be seated next to you in a generic kind of intervention.
Yeah. And especially when you're taking a program that is not meant to cause a behavior change,
Right.
uh, to change behavior. That is a weird and foreign concept to me as a health behavior change specialist,
Yeah.
because we make like we start out with the very thing we are trying to change and we're building everything around it. So the idea of taking a mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy to change something extremely specific is, yeah, maybe not the most effective. Not to say that the programs are completely wrong. They serve a purpose, but they don't serve the purpose of necessarily changing eating behavior.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I wanted to say that like make me really passionate is the misconceptions that I'm noticing amongst the participants. So they said, yes, we have really high knowledge of what this is and what it's supposed to do. And at the same time, I analyzed all of the attitudes. I gave them a really, really long list of possible pros and cons. Uh, and at the same time, people really do believe, even those that said, I have high knowledge of what mindful eating entails. They say it would make me feel guilty. I would no longer be able to eat everything I want to eat. It would make me constantly stressed about eating. And this is not what mindfulness and mindful eating programs intend to do. In fact, it is the opposite. So, how does one essentially raise awareness among the population that it's not a diet and yeah, that it's meant to do good, and yeah, it's not restrictive. That's the point. But how do we do that?
Well,
Yeah.
I think part of the answering to that question is why this podcast exists and why regular posts on social media about clarifying some of the misperceptions that are happening, as well as broadening our understanding that it's not always a misperception. Sometimes it's just maybe a little different, or the application is in a different context. Don't you have anything else you want to share with the viewers?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Well, our guest today is Christian Preissner. Thank you so much for being here. And for those who are watching or listening, remember that I will have links to this research, which just came out, so well timed. And Christian, special thanks to you for reaching out and saying this paper is about to come out. Let's have a conversation about it because that is very well timed. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you again for letting me talk about this. I had a good time. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, and I hope this exploration of behavioral change, mindfulness, and mindful eating was helpful to you in some way. Please remember to hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot, more than I can adequately describe here. And remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. I'll see you soon on Mindfulness Voyage.